Hi, Anish. Welcome to CTQ Smartcast. As you described yourself very pithily, Anish is a co-founder at Carat Lane, an Indian physical and online jewelry retailer. Hi.
Hi, Harish.
Yeah.
Thank you
But
so much for having me here.
yes, I'll have a more qualified introduction. I'm not going to be as succinct as you were. So Avnish is one of the most voracious readers that we know. In fact, let me qualify that further. He is probably the most voracious reader who's also an entrepreneur. Some of the best business book recommendations have come from you. And I thought I'll take this opportunity to pick your brains on what all you read, why you read, how you read, and what keeps you busy.
So I'll tell you that that's a very good question. So I'll tell you there are multiple reasons why I read what I read. Okay. And it all follows, each of them has a kind of a different reason. So for the longest time in life, I used to only read about sports. And I had interest in almost every sport. I can tell you that I would have read like 100 books on football, 50 books on basketball, for example. So each and every aspect of the sport, I have a lot of interest in. I think growing up, that was the only thing which was interesting to me. In fact, in college, I really tried to get into a sports company of any kind. And then I realized it was hard, but I was really making an effort. So sports is one thing which was of the highest interest from the beginning. So there is one whole track of reading a lot of sports books. And in sports, it's not just and I'll borrow a quote from Gary Smith, who's possibly the greatest sports writer I know, who says that a lot of the action happens in boxes, right? The boxes are the TV screens and the playing field, right? But according to him, the real action is outside the boxes, right? The story behind the story. And that is what really interests me as well. Why people do what they do, the whole social, cultural, various reasons, right? Like why is football such a crazy thing in Brazil, for example, and same for other sports, and the journey of that person, and the whole business of running sports, advanced analytics, all of these things interest me a lot. And I think I have been very fortunate that I was at a stage where the internet exploded in this country, and now you have so many books. But I think till I was in college, it used to be very hard to get information. I have almost memorized the newspaper ka sports section, Sports Star, all of these things, because that was the only thing available. Like when ESPN started the website, it was like a godsend for me. So that is one track of reading, Harish. The other thing has been because of work, right? That when you work, and I've been fortunate to be a generalist at work, which means that everything and anything is of interest, right? As to what you can do. So that influences a lot of your reading. You either read about entrepreneurs or great business people, or you read about specific aspects. And I think, again, I've been lucky that I think I'm on the curious side, on the higher side. So everything which you find interesting, no, it's like you have to get to the end of it. So I will have 200 browser windows open on my phone, because everything which you are reading, it's unless and until you finish it, it has to be kept open as a thread. So that is a lot of business reading. I would say work-related reading. But then because I have been a generalist, so whether it is customer experience or analytics or tech or marketing or product, or all of those things have been of interest. And one book leads to the other book, right? Because when you read, then you think, then you want to know more, and then it leads to another book. And I do this research on books, right? That if I have a question, which is the book which is going to answer this question in my head? And then I think the final part is all the random reading of random things which interest you. So I'll give you an example how my reading happens. That I have been very fascinated by the fact that how did Europe get on top of the world, right? Because till 1500, they were not there, right? And the world was dominated by China, the Islamic Empire, India, all of these people were far ahead. So how did Europe get on top of it? I have been researching and reading and researching and reading, and now I've read 10 books on it. It's like that. And everybody you will meet, you will talk. And one of the reasons I write and tweet also is to get some response from somebody, because that means that that person also knows about it, and he might know some other book or he'll have some information. Dhammo, right? One of the things happened that I spoke about something, then Dhammo responded, and Dhammo actually put me onto this really awesome book. and he introduced me to Simon Winchester, who's written a lot of awesome books. So that's how it goes. And I think that's the part which is the one of the most beautiful thing about reading, that you meet other people and then you talk and you discover more. And that's where I think diversity of people you meet is very important, because like you are also a sports person also, but you read about business also. And then I'll meet somebody who's really interested on HR, for example, or psychology, and then you talk and you find out stuff. So I think people is the other part. Yeah, as in, so history is something which psychology leads to marketing and then consumer behavior. So it's, I think one thing which I realized early is that don't pigeonhole yourself that, okay, these are the things I should read about, because you never know where you will find something which is interesting. And the more I've read, you will find very disparate books on disparate subjects, which will connect beautifully. So you might be reading a business book and a philosophy book and a history book, but you will see that they are connecting. And I think that's another very fascinating thing about reading when you read a wider genre of books. So yeah, so it's like this thing, right, that you keep researching and you keep writing and you read and you talk to people and you keep discovering more interesting stuff. And it's just, I find it so fascinating that that gives you the energy and the drive to keep doing it. It's like a drug now, right? You keep getting your highs regularly.
Right. So you mentioned a very interesting point, Avnish. So do you think you start building that knowledge after you have covered a very wide range? Because initially some people feel that, oh, who have just started reading or who have read very few books, they are not able to make those connections. It's only, do you think there is a certain critical mass that you have to cross before you can start making those connections?
I possibly that, yes, some of, if you could say, levels of enjoyment of reading, then there is obviously a level 2 and a level 3 when these, like when you have these awesome conversations or these great connects, that obviously happens at a level 2, I would say, if I can just simplify that. But I would say even before that, I think one thing which is very useful is to develop a love for reading and to figure out a way to keep reading regularly. And I think there is sometimes people find hard to do that, to get started on reading. And I think you should start with areas or books which you know you will really love. And a lot of people tell me, no, I can't finish a book, and I just tell them that you haven't found the right book for yourself. And I think I would say that you should first start with books you will love, where you can't go wrong, where you're not in a way experimenting and trying new areas. And as you get into that habit of reading and then reflecting and enjoying a book, I think then that critical mass starts to build, where you are now willing to try a lot of other areas. So the reading really started around 2006-7 when I first read, and I even very vividly remember that I first read Malcolm Gladwell's the first book, Tipping Point. And that was like this whole new genre of books, right, which was not there. And it just started from there, that I found it very fascinating. Then I read Freakonomics, then I read his other books. So that was interesting. If I don't know if I had read something a little more deep, I is say something on like a Martin Seligman kind of book, which is very deep level psychology, then I don't know whether I would have found it interesting then.
Right.
But I think because you go through this path and then you keep expanding your boundary or your horizon of reading.
And over the years, has your reading tastes changed? Do you still read a lot of sports, or have you reached that level where you read everything and you are the one who actually starts making those connections yourself?
So I think, yes, definitely the reading has evolved. Okay. And I would say even in sports, it has evolved in terms of the kind of books which you research and want to read about. And I'll give you two examples that I have been super fascinated, say, by the 1982 Brazilian side. I can't tell you. So I've waited and I've gone on Twitter, asked football writers if they can recommend a great book, that kind of thing. But nobody ever gave a recommendation because there was nothing. So finally I got this book, so I read that. And when you read that, then you get more fascinated by other aspects of South American football. So then you want to read another book. So in that sense, a lot of it has evolved. What I've now also developed is that it's the way you exercise the whole body, and there are different kind of exercises, lighter ones and more rigorous ones. That now sports reading, no, is the lighter reading after you read a heavy book, like you read some major history or other book or even a business book sometimes, because you want to read and extract more. And you take like a lighter sports book and quickly finish it. And sometimes you'll actually do binge reading for sports.
Right.
So that's how I think it goes. But I think on the second point which you mentioned, which is about the connecting and having your own thoughts, I think that is definitely something which you get better with as you read more. And then you have a list of questions which you want to answer in your life, and you keep looking for sources of information.
Right.
And often it comes from books, because the thing which I tell everybody is that the depth of analysis you only get in a book, right? Where each side is analyzed and all the pros and cons, and there is a detail to it which really makes it enjoyable, and you also feel that you have really got into the depth of the and I think that, like I said earlier, right, that you should not limit yourself and say I want to know about this, because you don't know where you will find what. You should not say that. In fact, my wife was very surprised when she saw me reading a biology book. I hated that subject in school, and I thought I would never read it. But because there was a chapter about how they have used DNA sequencing, etc., to settle the Aryan debate, right? The Aryan invasion theory. So to understand that, there is a lot of information about DNA and chromosome and X and Y. And because it is in that context, you find it interesting and you read it. And then you actually just think about it that, oh my God, I never thought that I would be reading all of this ever in my life. I just thought I was done with it and I just managed to pass my exams. But that's what it does when you don't put any restrictions. That I think that context in which you read stuff lets you read all kinds of things which you didn't find so interesting earlier.
Yeah. Have there been things that you have applied at work or in life that you can immediately think of, which you pick directly from a book?
Yeah, I think a lot of examples. In fact, I would say that I learned more through books and by trying to do what I learned in a book than what I learned in school and college, for sure. So I'll give you some examples. Like when I read Give and Take by Adam Grant. So that, I think, is one of those books which had a major, profound influence, right? So it gave you a lot of clarity in life, and it also gave you clarity on how to go about it. So that is something which I have really tried to inculcate in my life. And that's also the book which I give to a lot of people. I would have bought at least 30 copies from Amazon. Then there is a recent book which I read on serendipity, which I had my own thoughts on serendipity and being optimistic. But that book just put it very beautifully together, all of those concepts, which I had not thought of it the way that book thought about it. That how being very optimistic and being able to react to opportunities. They say that being prepared for the opportunities which come in life, how you create good luck for yourself. So that is something. Then having read it the way I read it, then you could immediately take some things from it and apply in your life. Those are two examples. And a lot of one other book which I really found very useful is this book by Clayton Christensen, which is the book on jobs theory. I forget the name. Competing Against Luck. So that's another book which is something which I found very useful. It just changed the way you think about things.
Right.
And you can keep applying it all your life in various aspects at work mostly, and even otherwise.
Right. Yeah. So how do you read books? Are you reading multiple books at the same time? Take one book, finish it off, and then move to the next one. How does that go?
It's always been multiple books. In fact, the thing is that I mentioned earlier, right, that curiosity is a big driver in this, right? So what also happens is that, and there are multiple reasons why multiple books are read at the same time. One of the reasons is, like I told you, that you need to do thoda heavy reading and light reading, so you mix that. Second, I've also found that sometimes to really enjoy a book, you should take a break from it. Like you read a few chapters and then you take a break, then you go back to it. So that's useful. The third reason is that what happens is that, and I'll give you a very recent example. Like when Maradona died, right? Suddenly you want to just go and read the books again and read the other stuff which you have not read. So it's like something which you need that instant gratification that I want to read this now. So you always end up ordering or just starting a new book like this. So then there is one more window which you open and then you start reading. And then, what happens because of this is that there are some books which you have read 20%, 30%, 50%, which kind of then have to take a back seat. And you might go back to it after a month's time again after you have finished something else. So the answer is that yes, there are always multiple books books which are being read for various reasons. Sometimes you just want to read something, it has caught your fancy, or you just come across something which you feel like, okay, I just need to read this because I want to solve this problem, or I want to just understand this well. So every time I find a book on the Europe wala problem I spoke about earlier, I have to read it. So you change the priority and you say, okay, this needs to be read. And yeah, the other thing happens because of the trying to balance. And I just find it very interesting. And I have often seen, and I don't know whether it is like a fundamental attribution error because of which I feel I am connecting between two books which I'm reading in parallel, although they are not in the same subject. But and I don't know whether I'm overthinking, but it happens all the time.
Yeah, or that's the story we tell ourselves.
Yeah. But I'll give you one example of that I was reading. There is this book by Simon Sinek called Leaders Eat Last.
Right.
And I was reading Yuval Noah Harari's book Sapiens at the same time, parallelly. And I just got this feeling that both of the books were the same, and they were just starting at different ends and going to the other point. Meaning, one was teaching you that how we evolved because we had cooperation, and the other one was saying that to find answers for what requires great culture and cooperation, you have to go back to evolution and find those answers. So it was that I think was really, and it just happened accidentally that I happened to be reading them like that. But it just opened my eyes to that possibility of reading similar books and then letting those ideas interact with each other.
So one thing that we often hear from people, and that's a question that I wanted to pose to you. So from an opportunity cost point of view, how do you pick what to read?
I'll tell you one very important rule, because you mentioned opportunity cost, is to stop reading a book if it is not giving you anything. You should not worry about that I spent money on this book or I've already read half of it. If it's not interesting, you should drop it because you're not getting anything, right? Which means that the cost is going without any return on it. The second thing is that, again, the return can be of various types, right? There are certain books which will really help you at work, and there are certain books which you just read to feel good about yourself, right? Or to answer questions which you have in your head. So it's to scratch the itch which you have. And as long as you are getting it, I think the return is there. The priority, like I said, is a very dynamic thing. It keeps changing basis what is going on in your life, or what are some of the important questions which you really want to answer. So, like right now, I am reading a Maradona book because Maradona is the flavor right now. And at the same time, I'm reading a book on gunpowder, which explains the whole China-Europe dynamic, which is important because that's a problem which is a long-term thing which I want to understand. And I'm reading one more book, which is about applying behavioral psychology in advertising. That's something for work, because I feel that while you read a lot about psychology, there are very few books which really help you apply it into business, right? Marketing or advertising. It's because I found it finally, and I have this rule also in terms of the price which you pay for a book. So I broke that rule for that book
What
because
is
it's
the
so
rule?
useful. Yeah, so it's an important problem because while I've read a lot of psychology, I could never apply it properly. So you see, these are three important reasons to read each of these three books, which is why they are currently priority you to read, and you would have put something else on hold for the time being.
And what's the rule that you follow for the book, for the price of the book?
So typically, I'm a very old-fashioned person that I want a hardcover or a paperback. I don't want a Kindle book unless and until it's not available or it's very expensive. Because I buy a lot of books, generally my rule is that I should not pay more than 500 rupees for it.
Okay.
If you have waited for a while, it's still not coming and it's very important, then you will go to 600-700. But I would not go to 1,000. It really has to be a special book for me to pay $1,000 for it.
Okay. That's a good thumb rule to have. Avnish, you know that we love our quizzing. So I'm going to ask some quiz questions to you.
Very bad at that. I
Yes.
don't remember facts, but ठीक है.
Yeah, so these are not going to be facts, but these are going to be questions which are right down your, and to make sure that there's something at stake, every question that you get, you'll actually will give you a free pass for the CTQ compounds that you can gift to.
Wonderful.
So the first question for today, I'll read it out. So the term bibliosmia is associated with the charm of reading. Its absence is lamented by some readers in the modern era of books. What does bibliosmia mean? I'll spell it out. Bibliosmia. What does it mean?
I'm just trying to figure out the etymology of it. That biblio I am getting. Bibliophile, they say, is somebody who's really into books, right?
Loves books.
Yeah, loves books. Bibliosmia, I'm guessing that it is, I don't know, the negative emotions which you experience because you are deprived of books.
Okay, so let me repeat this, the clue part of the question. So the absence of bibliosmia is lamented by some readers in the modern era of books.
Oh, okay. So the absence of bibliosmia is lamented. I think it is the love for books, because a lot of people today feel that you don't need to read a book, you have articles and blogs and everything. And I also lament the fact that most people feel that there is no need to read a book and it's good enough to read an article for whatever purpose. Yeah, I'm guessing it is then the fact that you don't want to read a book, or as in you don't see the value in reading a book.
No, you are okay. Let's think of modern era of books from a physical book standpoint.
Oh, the physical books, not and digital versus physical, right? People who
Yeah,
love
yeah.
the physical book. Oh, okay, okay, okay.
So bibliosmia means the smell of a book.
Ah, yes.
So
I can totally relate to that. And when you meet another person who loves a physical book, they always talk about the smell.
yeah. So how do you split your physical and Kindle book reading time then?
So Kindle is only on a need to basis when you can't get your hands on the physical book. Okay. And also there are, I'll tell you, and this is like a secret, that like when you go to bed, you have to turn off the light so you can't read a physical book. So then you having a Kindle is handy. Sometimes when you're in a boring meeting, okay, you obviously can't read a physical book over there. Nobody is going to tell you, they'll think you're just checking your phone, reading your mails, but you're actually reading a book. There are these situations where having a Kindle book is very handy. And I think those are generally the reasons why I would have a Kindle book. And if that physical copy is not available, but otherwise it's always the physical book. I need that bibliosmia, which is the smell of a book and the tactile thing of having it in your hand. And highlighting gives you this great joy, which highlighting on Kindle doesn't make you feel. When you throw a marker, you feel that yes, it's been utilized fully because I read a lot of books and I put it to use. So ordering highlighters is also one of the things which I really enjoy, because it's connected to the fact that yes, it's in a way a milestone. Okay, you have read a lot and highlighted what was useful.
Right. Yeah. So in fact, that brings me to the next question. I know that you take a lot of notes. What do you do with all the stuff that you highlight, and how do you retrieve it? Is there a note management system that you follow? And especially
So,
since you have both the physical and the Kindle books. So how do you marry the two?
so I have now, there is this very good book about storytelling by Indranil Chakravarti, right? Um, So when you read the book, the first thing he says is to be a great storyteller, you need to have a great story retrieval mechanism. And he spoke about how you should go about doing it. So after I read that, I tried to copy it. So now I make notes in Evernote and I put tags, important stuff which you see in the chapter or the book. Although I've not been very diligent, it's very hard to do it every time. One, while you're reading in the flow, highlighting itself is like a break in the reading, right? And then making notes. So I have a big pile up of pending books for which I should have made notes, but I would still say that 40% of the time I'm doing it. So that's the thing which helps, that you are able to take screenshots or you write down, and when you write down, you put the page number also, that you'll say, okay, this was in this page and the page number. Sometimes you will just make a book journal kind of thing where all the interesting stuff about the book will be in one note. Sometimes some individual thing itself will be so interesting that it will be a separate note in itself. And sometimes you'll organize information around a topic from different books. So you'll have one thread, like the thing about I told you about, the Europe thing, for example. So that's a note. So every time you come across new information, you just keep adding it over there. So yeah, typically, and I definitely want to get better at doing it. And I would say better more in terms of the diligence. But yeah, and I think that note taking is very important. More from often you can't recollect where you had read that, and it really bugs me. And I sometimes do Google book search and all, but it's not very helpful. So a lot of the examples, right? You read somebody did something, and then when you really need that example and more information, then you struggle. So that was the problem which I always had, and then so therefore that's the motivation to do at least this note taking at least some of the time.
Good to know that you're also struggling with the note taking bit. That's something which I have struggled a lot. And it's not about the app, it's more about the diligence
Yes.
that you need to bring to the whole process.
If there was a audio thing, it would have been very easy while you read, right? And if you could just take notes by converting audio to text, I think that would really help, because writing, it's not that you can type with one hand on your phone, right, while you're reading. So you always have to either get on your laptop, or you need to take both hands and write it down diligently. If there was a way you could just say that, and the notes got transcribed into text, that I think would really help. In fact, I have actually never tried this properly with the current tools also. I think it's worth a shot.
So do
And
you
I see a lot of people talking about tools for this, Harish. That I
yeah,
recently, there was one guy who spoke to me also. He's built a product for the same thing. And he was mentioning, and I think there are others also who I have spoken to about the same problem. So I think it's a fairly important problem.
yeah, yeah.
And I think a difficult one, because of which we don't have anything better than Evernote, which I think is, while it is good, it's not ideal for this.
Right. I think I've come across a few apps. There is Evernote for sure. There is Notion that people have been using. There is Home. Some people have also used Brain. There is an app called Brain. So they've used that as well for note taking. But I think the app is a secondary bit. It's first.
It's diligent and it's just behavior. You mentioned one thing, right? I often have this challenge that if you have 2 hours, suppose in a day, to read. So in my mind, the cost benefit analysis is always that, can I read for 2 hours, or should I read for 1 hour then spend 1 hour taking notes about it? And it's always because you never have enough time to read, right? You will never have that luxury. So it's always the urge to read a little more, which overcomes the diligence to take notes for the time which you have.
And sometimes, at least for me, it also feels like you are polluting the act of reading by taking the time.
That's why I said, no, even the highlighting is a break from the reading. Then you have to take a proper break and write it, right? It's going to take, when you highlight, it hardly takes any time, right? But when you take notes, you at least need,
Correct.
either if you do it intermittently, it's a pain, right? Because then you will do it after every 2, 3, 4 pages. If you do it after reading a whole chapter also, then it's going to take 5 minutes to put everything down, and it just becomes a break.
Yeah.
Which is why these are problems, where I really wish there was some AI or something which could just, you say things and it just extracts the right stuff and puts it in a nicely organized text with tags.
But yeah, you and I both know that these are all excuses that we are giving ourselves.
Yeah, it's an excuse. There is nothing. I was reading some book recently about humor, and the writer is a professor of psychology in some American university, and his co-writer is a journalist. And he said that I went to his library, and there was, like, his office rather, and he had like lots of books, beautifully catalogued, and with all those post-it notes and organized and everything properly, notes taken. And it's, you just thinking, oh my god, mother, he must be the most diligent and the most organized person in the world if he's managed to do that. It's like a dream situation, right? Like you wish you had.
Right. Yeah. Do you think other entrepreneurs in India, they read enough? Why or why not? And should they read more?
So I definitely think a lot of them read a lot, And I say that basis some conversations and basis what you see them either writing or tweeting about. I obviously can't put a number to that what percentage read, but I have seen some of them read, and you can understand that they have like very insightful things based on a combination of what they have read and what they've experienced themselves. And sometimes when you see something and you can infer that it comes from some book which you have also read, it's always a nice thing. Like recently I was in some conversation where Ajit Balakrishnan was there, and he spoke about the three things which the internet does, right? Any e-commerce business. And that is from a book written by this professor at Harvard called Thales Teixeira. Okay. It's called Uncoupling the Value Chain or something. And you know that it was from there because he's the one who's mentioned this. And you just feel good that a great guy like him has also read it and he's using it in the conversation. So then you know that he's done a lot of reading and he knows that. So I think a lot of people definitely read. Okay. Second, on your second question, I'll give you the example of who's the CEO at Carat Lane. That initially he wasn't the reading types, right? But as the business became more complex, as the business started to scale, and we started to face new problems, and I used to keep sharing book excerpts with him and books. So slowly he started reading, and I can say that now he's like a far more regular reader, and he reads a lot. He reads fast. So it changed. So I think that it again is if you are not the reader types, I think it is more because you have not met the right book or somebody has not shared the right stuff with you. And I think that every entrepreneur who's facing problems every day and wants new ways to solve those problems, if he just finds the right book, so somebody can just point it out to him, he will definitely read because they are all seeking answers, right? A lot of times they reach out to other people or they use other resources to answer those questions. But if they could get access to the right book for their right problem, I don't see any reason why they would not, because they all want the answer. Because we are all in that third stage of learning in a life, right? Where there is no mentor or one person who can answer our question, right? Or we can't go to a school or college and get our answers. We have to find the answers ourselves. Sometimes even the problems and questions ourselves. And for that, I think books are a great source, but it's also a problem of too much, right? You don't know which one to read, which one will answer it, because you only find out after having read the book, right? And you read back, this is such a colossal waste of your time. So I think that yes, people do read, and people would read if they could figure out which ones to read. Yeah, I can't overemphasize the reading part, right? You look at all the great people, right? Bill Gates, or whether it is Jeff Bezos, all of these people read like voraciously, right? And you can see it in their thinking, right? That they again connect or borrow ideas from such diverse fields. So I don't think we need to even argue about the merits of diverse reading. Reading also, it's not just that you read generally, reading the right kind of books, reading variety, reading regularly, and also reflecting. I think if you just read without reflecting and absorbing and thinking about it and talking to people, then it doesn't help, right? It's just input without any output. But if you do all of that, then I cannot overemphasize the reading for me. I value all the books which I've read more than all the education which I got in life.
In terms of kinds of reading, do you read fiction?
I don't have time for fiction anymore. I read a lot of it, I think till like around 15 years back. And then it's again a question of priority, right? You have to stop doing some things if you want to read. I think reading is one thing where I've done, at least got some discipline on not doing certain things. So I don't read fiction. I watch, I would say, less movies and Netflix series, because again, it's a question of I can do this or I can read. Yeah, but fiction is something which has completely taken a backseat, and there are certain books which I've wanted to read for some time. It's always that question that it's always competing with something else which I really have a tearing urge to read.
So what else has been sacrificed at the altar of reading?
So the kind of people you hear about who are happy to stay at home, who don't have the need to go out or do any physical activity. So people like me actually didn't have a problem during COVID also, when you couldn't go out. Yeah, I'm not the kind ki let's go for a drive, or it's only when the family really wants to, or the kids will say, or my wife will say, then I do that. But otherwise, so I don't watch a lot of TV, for example. other than sports, and obviously no Netflix, very little of that. And I think that's pretty much it. And yeah, like I said, less physical activity, obviously, bare minimum. And you find interesting ways to read more. So they say that you can't do two cognitive activities at the same time, right? That kind of multitasking is not possible, right? But there are multitasking where one activity is not cognitive, right? Like when you're eating, when you are traveling to work, or even traveling otherwise. So I try and maximize those opportunities.
Right.
The boring meeting I told you, where you can read a Kindle book, that kind of thing.
Nice. So if I were to put you in the spot and ask you to give me 3 books that every entrepreneur, okay, let's limit it, let's restrict it to entrepreneur in India should read. What are the 3 books that every entrepreneur in India should read?
Okay, I'll just take a minute here. Let me just think. So there is this book which I read recently called The Innovation Stack. This is about the story of Square. And they say that when you're trying to solve a new interesting problem, then it needs a series of innovations, because when you solve one problem, it creates another problem, and then you need to solve that. And to really crack the overall problem, right, and to crack the business, you need to solve all of these problems. So in a way, that creates the innovation stack, which is a set of interconnected innovations. And this is some of, other than Square, some of the other organizations which have managed to do this very well. One of them is Southwest, which we are all familiar with. So I think, and that is also true if you have read the Starbucks books. So while it is one book, which is the Innovation Stack, I think if you are reading that, then you might be tempted to read the Starbucks, the Southwest Airlines books also. So that is definitely one. The other book, which I think in terms of biographies and autobiographies, I would say that, and this is actually not for entrepreneurs, but I think this is more useful for people who run larger established companies. That if you read Bob Iger's biography, I think that's possibly the best example of somebody who's turned a big giant company into a very digital, innovative, agile organization very successfully, and that the kind of size they have is phenomenal. So it's not for, but I think it's still useful for an entrepreneur also. But I think that's one very useful book. Somebody asks you a question, or then your mind forgets all of these books. But let me just think 1 second. I think one other book which I have recommended to a lot of people and they have read and found it very useful is Range. And I think Range is also another book which will open your mind to read a lot of other books after that. But I think Range is useful because it just explains to you how to deal with the complexity which we face every day, right? Unseen problems, unknown problems, and to figure out a way using the analogy-based thinking, or to expand the diversity in your life, right? Whether it is the diversity of people or the diversity of your own reading or information gathering, and why it's important to keep experimenting, because it's not just for experimenting, but that is what gives you diversity. So I would say Range is the other one, which I think we should definitely read. And the last one would be, I would say that this, and I'm really suffering from recency bias, so please pardon me for that, Harish, because in a situation like this, you tend to remember the more recent books which you've read. And I'm just realizing that I have that bias and I'm not even able to overcome it right now. But I think that, so the second book which Ben Horowitz wrote, right, which is that you are, I don't even remember the name, where it's something like you are the culture. Culture is what you make or what you do,
Correct,
something
correct.
like that, right?
Yeah.
Where he takes 4 examples and then he extracts the principles from those books. I think that's a very useful book because it's very practical, to the extent that it talks about why Uber's cultural principles failed, right? Because they were values and they were not virtues or stories which was easier to understand, and that left room for ambiguity. It's, I think, very useful in that sense. So yeah, I think it would be those three, and then a bonus one for non-entrepreneurs also. But
Nice.
yeah, you see, this is the thing, right? That I can't give you a very good answer right now because I would want to go back and look at it again. And I'm sure that after some time, I'll say, Arey, this book, I should have spoken about this. Like Loon Shots. Actually, Loon Shots is such an incredible book, which I don't know whether it is very popular. We all talk about culture, right? Ben Horowitz's book is about culture, the organization culture, and Loon Shots tells you about organization structure to get everything right and to get the balance between what he calls soldiers and scientists. And I think, so it would be like a 3A and 3B is Loon Shots and the Ben Horowitz book. And this is the other thing which people who read always do, that if you ask them for one, they will tell you three.
Yeah. So when I had listed down the questions, I wanted to ask you one. And I said, okay, let me give him a break. I'll make it 3. So you've actually taken it to 3A, 3B. So good.
Yeah, I don't think I can give you one.
Yeah. So on that note, another question, Avnish, do you think, or rather for you yourself, what are the other alternatives for learning? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you take courses? Is that also an avenue for learning that you actively consider?
So I'll see, the way I use podcasts is as a means to find interesting books. So if you listen to the HBI podcast, or the other podcasts, or the Big Idea Club, those are just, they filter a set of books for you because you hear 20 minutes about it. There is an interview with the author, or there is a small video or a summary of the book. It just, and because if they are recommending that book, that it's gone through a qualification process, so it just makes it easy for you to discover interesting books. I think the other way to learn is by talking to people. I think when you know people who have solved certain problems or who are good at certain areas, then I think that's the other thing which is very useful. Unfortunately, the problem is that when you read a book like of anybody who's built a business, right, then you understand, right, that by reading that book, that what he's done well or what he hasn't done well. But most of the time in India, we don't know, except for some examples. And unfortunately, for those examples, we don't have access to talk to that person. If I got a chance to speak to Mr. Sanjeev Bhikchandani, then that would be such an awesome thing. I would pay for it. Unfortunately, I can't get that access. And in his case, you know what he's built and what he's done really well. I think a lot of the others today, we still don't know exactly what pieces have they done really well, right? While we know the success which they're having in terms of the revenue numbers or the funding numbers, but most of the time you don't, like if I asked you that what is that Carat Lane does really well, right? What problems have we solved very well? I don't think you would have a very good understanding of that, right? So you would not know what is that I can tell you very well. And I think that's another thing which I don't know how to solve that problem. But if you could know that who are the people who are good at certain things, and if there was a way to interact with them or something, then that would be very useful.
Right.
So that then gets limited because you can only talk to people who you know very well, or you know what they have done very well. So that combination of access as well as knowing what they have done reduces that population. And I think that's why we are left to books. I tried masterclass, which I also found to be very useful, although I didn't go through all the courses, which in a way, if you see, is also in a way like a book, right? Because it's not like one video, right? There are a series of videos. So I watched only like a couple in full, including the one by Malcolm Gladwell on writing. So I think that is what really helps me. All the other sources, right? Whether it is Twitter or even TED or a YouTube video, is more like a bite which you get to taste. And then if you like the taste, then you need to have the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. Another question that came to mind when you were answering the previous one. Do you notice a bias of reading from Western sources, businesses, and do you think there isn't enough of Indian business writing, good Indian business writing, where Indian stories have been captured well?
Yes, I definitely think that we do not have a lot of books about Indian stories. And it's also about what kind of stories you're looking for, right? Like somebody like me is looking for more examples of DTC businesses or retail businesses or omni-channel businesses. So I had read Mr. Biani's book, for example, like long back. But today, if that book was available to me and if I had not read it, I would not find it useful to at least solve the problems which I have today, right? At one stage, it was useful. And if you think about it really, there are obviously not a lot of books in general, right? I've read some of the books and some of them are obviously useful because they set the Indian context. But often you don't need the book to give you like an exact solution, right? It gives you a framework to think about a problem, which is why I think that even if the story is not set in India or the business is not based in India, if there is a great lesson in that in terms of the framework or the approach or the analogy, it's still useful. And I often think about it that is there a bias? I also think that when you read a book by Ben Horowitz or Bob Iger, you think that, okay, this big American guy, big company, so it must be a better book. And is that the reason why we don't read some of the Indian books? I have not yet read the Flipkart story, for example. I don't know whether it's a bias in my head that I think that it's not going to be as useful as a every book. I don't know actually. But I agree that there are not a lot of books, but I also don't know why we don't read the ones which are already available. I know obviously if you think about it also, in terms of the number of success stories, right? Because a book will be based on how many success stories are there. So obviously there are more success stories in the West, in America more than any other place, and also in China now. So as compared to that, like I'm not interested so much in the Hero Honda story, for example, although it's a great story, but I'm more keen on reading about it, say a D2C business. So that also I think limits what and I'm only speaking for myself, but yeah, so I think it is less success stories, which is why less books also written about it. And I think there is a bias also in our head.
Okay. So let me ask you another quiz question at this point. And this is again something very closely related to
You
you.
ask very difficult questions again.
It's very closely related to you. Okay. So there's an evergreen flowering tree, the name of which has its origins in an Arabic word which means locust green pod. In the Mediterranean, these pods are often used as animal feed and in times of famine as the last source of human food in hard times. Okay. What is the connection of the pods or the seeds of this tree with you?
Oh God, can you just repeat the question?
Okay, so there's an evergreen flowering tree, name of which has its origins in an Arabic word, which means locust green pod. It's basically a seed that we are talking about, and the seeds were also used for a certain purpose, because of which a word has come about, which is very closely related to you.
Oh God, I'm very bad at these types of questions. I always enjoy listening to people break it up. The Ananta Narayan has these questions, and I used to just, it's good to see the solutions, but I have never been able to crack anything.
Okay. Okay. So these seeds were used for weighing something.
Oh, does it have to do with diamonds or something?
Yeah, diamonds as well. So,
Okay.
what is the word? Let's come to the word. What do you think is the word that is so closely related to you?
The word, right? I'm so glad that we don't have an audience right now because I'm doing so badly. I'm just giving, I can't, my brain is, no, I can't come up with anything, but I need a hint.
Okay. So, the seeds were used to weigh gold and other precious.
Okay. I thought, I was thinking diamonds. So does it have to do anything with the guinea or something?
Not Guinea. So, the word which is used, which is directly connected with you.
With me, Avnish, right?
Yeah, with you. Yeah, with you, Avnish. Yes. So, the word, the name of the tree is CAROB.
CAROB.
Yeah, that's the name of the tree. What's the word that I'm looking for?
You are overestimating my quizzing ability. I'm very bad. You think just because I know Dhammo, I'm at least 10% as good as him, but I'm possibly 0.1%. there.
So just say that word. I spelled it out.
Carob.
Yeah. So what is a word that has its origins from that tree?
Carrot.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the diamond thing, no?
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
So the
Oh,
word carrot comes from the carob seeds or carob pods, and they were used for weighing gold back then. So that's how the word carrot comes, and carrot. Yeah. So
I'm going to say this to somebody and act smart. Hopefully someday.
all right. One thing that I've noticed a lot about you, especially on your LinkedIn feed and Twitter, is that you write a lot about what you read. So is that a very conscious decision to share your learning, or is it more a selfish desire to consolidate your own learning? So is it more of sharing, or is it that when you write about it or when you teach something or learn that better is one school of thought? What is the objective behind writing so much?
See, one thing is that for me, the selfish interest first is that if you write something, then you get to meet other people who are interested in that same subject. And I have seen that happen so many times. Back in the day, like 10 years back, I used to write regularly on sports, very regularly. But how often I write today is nothing compared to how regular I used to be once upon a time while I was writing on sports. And I met all kinds of such incredible people. I'm like a nutcase when it comes to sports. I told it's not that you're just interested in the regular stuff, the match or the player. You will be interested in all kinds of vague things like Palwankar Balu ka kya stats tha and what did his brothers do and that kind of vague stuff. There is a tribe of people who are like this, right? It's like you are sending out your scent so that you can catch other people like that, literally. That whenever you put some information out there, because if you have noticed, right, that there has to be something interesting about it. It's not just because it's not just regular gyan, right? It has to be really interesting stuff. So for me, and I really am, the thing which makes me most happy is when people respond and we have a conversation, and sometimes that conversation goes offline and we have a longer conversation. People recommend other books, or people even have contradictory views, or they challenge your view. Then it leads to a conversation, right? And you find people. So one is that you find more people, so you make friends who then you can talk to them and you can discuss other stuff with them. You also, your own understanding of that subject improves because you get one more opinion on it. So those are, I think, two very big selfish motives for that, to do that. There is a third selfish reason that I feel, that you spoke about bibliosmia, right? Which is so whatever is called, right, to make more people read, right? So I also feel that if you give people the right kind of books or the right excerpts from books, then it is likely to get them to start reading. So before LinkedIn, I used to I still do that on a lot of our internal groups. So we have multiple groups in the organization, and then I have some groups with some batchmates or some other friends. So I used to share that a lot over there, and then people take interest and they want to read that, then they read. And the thing is that if they read something which you're recommending, then you can also have a conversation with them. And I found that to be very useful. And then I post on Instagram or LinkedIn or Twitter sometimes for the same reason, that the more people find interesting stuff, the more likely they are to read. So there are more readers, and hopefully it also serves your selfish interest, right? Talking to people about a book is the most amazing thing, right? So hopefully you're seeding the seeds of getting more people to read these books, and then it leads to great conversations.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. So that's all a grand, cunning plan to grow the tribe.
yeah, that's the thing, right? The first two are easier, and then the third is that I've seen that a lot of people will then ask you that what book is this, can I read? And then I've seen, and the more you see success in that yes, people are actually reading and they're asking, then it just makes you feel convinced that okay, let me keep doing this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you talked about growing the network of people that you know who are interested in something. So when you are writing stuff like this, it's also building your social capital in terms of people coming to know that these are the kind of things that you read, and what you know, and thus they find common ground and you can have a conversation. a lot of people do read, but we also see, and especially as part of our corporate engagements, we see this desire for organizations to have more of their employees write more about what they know, what they are good at, so that people get to know that these are interested in something like this or whatever. So from that lens, are there any tips that you have for people how they can think about posting stuff like this? So whenever they find something interesting, whatever they have made a note of, should they post that? What are the triggers that you use? When do you post something like this on social media?
See, I'll tell you, I will inverse that question. Okay. That the question to be asked is that why do people not post or not write? And I'll tell you the biggest fear for people out there is the fear of looking bad. Now take anybody, right? He is suppose somebody is a big shot in some company, right? In a very senior position. So he obviously has a great reputation, right? People think of him very highly. Now imagine that guy posts and puts his own views out there. See, one thing is that I can post about an article, right? I share an article, which I know is already a very popular article because I can see that it's been shared a lot or it has a lot of whatever shares, likes, whatever. So it's a very safe thing to do to share an article, right? It's also a very safe thing to share a very popular book. There are a lot of books which are very popular, right? Which you can just share and it's a great book. If you share Stephen Covey's book of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, nobody's going to say ki ye kya hai. But the real challenge is to share something which is not popularly accepted, whether it is a point of view or whether it is a book or it is any such thing. Then you are really putting yourself out there that people could just, like, nobody reacts to it. You post something and nobody reacts to it, then your worry is that people think that nothing, or you have your point of view is useless. And the fear is that even people who respect you might feel कि इसकी कोई औकात नहीं है. His views have no value and people worry about it, right? Because they have built a great name or reputation for themselves. And I've had conversations with people on this. And this is the fear which they sometimes acknowledge, sometimes they don't. That is the single biggest reason, this fear of looking bad. Because on LinkedIn, when people will see कि ये post किया and nobody likes it or nobody is responding or everybody is saying what a stupid idea this is, yeah, it just makes you look bad, and or rather people feel that it will make me look bad. And I think that's the biggest mental block which people have to really get out there. So in our company, for example, we do this talk about a book, present it. And
One second. Yeah, sorry.
so I know a lot of people who really had, it was a big challenge for them. You can take that call.
No. It's my son who's in Hyderabad right now. So
Achha,
he
he's
doesn't know
calling you.
that I'm recording something. So yeah.
A lot of people who generally are in very good positions, have done well, were not very comfortable doing it. They always felt that, will I do a good job of it or not, right? But slowly, by encouraging them in smaller groups and by showing that yes, others were also doing it, then it helped everybody come out. So we had, at least for an internal audience, which is a company audience, a lot of them actually then started doing that, right? And then I've seen some of them have started writing also, because they saw me writing and I kept telling them, you write. So what happens is that they will write, then they will share it with you. Avnish, is it okay? You will give them some feedback. And I'll tell you other small things which you have to do is that you have to also encourage them by, if somebody writes an article, right, on Medium, you have to get a lot of others to read it forcibly if needed, to comment, do whatever, to encourage that person. And we are all creatures who are really affected by this herd mentality, right? I have seen that you can out and you comment or like, suddenly others will also start doing that, because they go by the same social signals or the data signals. And suddenly the guy who's written it feels much better about it, that, okay, I was not rejected, right? I was not spurned. And then that will encourage him to start writing more. And the more you write, writing is not an easy thing, right? Because the clarity which you need to write is much more than what you have, what you need when you speak, right? So it obviously is a difficult thing, but once you get the hang of it, once you get comfortable with it, you keep getting better at it. It is a very gradual process of encouraging people to first read, then speak about it possibly, then slowly start writing, and you have to keep propping them up. The small nudges and support which you need to show to encourage them. And at least I can say, and I'm saying this because I've seen this happen in my company, that now we have some people who write regularly, who write on Medium or who post on LinkedIn, and they have slowly developed or built this confidence. And one person doing it, then you feel that मैं भी कर सकता हूँ. So I think that is what organizations need to do, that it's not an easy process, but if you're committed to it and you gradually encourage people and you build first an internal thing within the organization where people start writing, posting, and you help them initially by doing that dhakka, right? Like the way you push a product out, right? Initially, all your customers are your friends and family. And then it starts to slowly take off. I think that's what helps. Yeah, sometimes you might even need to get somebody who you can coach people on how to write, because people are not sure about those things, right? If you have somebody who can just give you some feedback on small editing tips, stuff like that, then it just helps people do that. And it's like a culture thing which you have to build, that everybody is writing, people are talking, people are discussing books. Then everybody gets into that thing, right? They know that, okay, this is happening. So like this Friday thing is now a fairly regular thing in our company. And we have lots of people. You would think that it's only, so-called intellectual janta which will present, the product guys, the business guys, the marketing guys. But now we have all kinds who present, sales guys, ops people. So they are encouraged to read and to write. And I think that's how it works.
Yeah. I think that is very insightful that you mentioned having that close group first, which is nurturing, right? It takes space. It is okay, and you also sometimes need to have that artificial propping up of the first few people who write. Others need to see that they're not being put down, and that makes a big difference. We've seen that in a lot of these kind of engagements that we've done. So I think that makes perfect sense. You almost have to design that.
You have to make it happen. A lot of things just don't happen on their own.
Correct.
It's a very idealist view. It doesn't happen. So you can't also say, okay, if you're getting criticism, deal with it. People have very fragile egos, right? You don't want it to be shattered initially and then they never go back to that. And then others will be even more fearful. Boss, never try this.
Yeah, and they can choose to not do it because of a bad experience, and they're fine, right? But you're missing out on the positives that could come out of having a culture like this. Yeah. So at this point, I'll take a quick break, Nish, and come back and talk more about digital and retail.
Okay.
Just wanted to take a short break so that you can have water or something like that.
I'll just take 1 minute, Harish. Yes, Harish.
Yeah. So let's come back. There were a couple of points earlier when the audio. I wouldn't even say garbled, but I could make out what you were saying. But we'll just have to see how it is coming out in the edit when I get the recording on Zoom. Hopefully, it should not. It must have been some temporary blip at one of our ends.
And if you need, I don't know, to say that again or something, then I can do that.
Yeah. So I'll look at the recording and then I'll tell you about that. Yeah. Okay, welcome back. In the next section, we'll talk about digital retail in India and building an enduring organization. So before we get started, another quiz question. So
I need some hack to get around this.
So this one should be an easy one. So which company launched a new line of business in March 2020 called Just Walk Out?
Nike.
Okay, not Nike, but it's a technology that powers
Zoom.
retail.
Oh, it's a technology with
Just Walk Out.
It must be It's one of the mainstream ones, yeah?
Yeah, it's a big one. but it's an interesting spin. So when you say
Okay.
mainstream ones, what do you mean? What are the, you
You
know,
know, like the Adobe Oracle types.
no, but definitely mainstream in retail.
Oh,
The biggest in retail that you can think of.
Walmart,
Not Walmart. Then what?
Amazon.
Yeah.
Oh, is this the thing which they have, right, in their retail, the technology which they have built?
Yeah. So the
Ah,
technology that powers its Amazon Go stores, they are
yeah, it's called
now,
Just Walkout.
yeah. So they
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
actually selling it as a technology that any retail store can take. Obviously, there is now some debate around, yeah, they're trying to make all these other retailers also, like Amazon, and they'll be slaves to Amazon and all that. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, as in they had it in one of the Whole Food store, but the idea was that it was more to showcase the technology. That one.
Correct. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So in March 2020, I think it must have coincided with the whole COVID lockdown thing, and
Yes.
based on what I've read on in all the reviews, it's more of cashierless system, and it does
Yes.
have its limitations in terms of how many people it can manage, because people are carrying stuff, moving stuff around, and that becomes difficult for the technology to track. But I think it's a good start for sure, and they've started selling this technology to
No,
other
no.
stores.
For sure. See, I have spoken to one or two people who have actually been in their Amazon Go stores in Seattle, I think,
Hmm. Yeah,
and it really works.
yeah,
I think it was only for Amazon employees for some time.
correct.
And I know it's again, you could argue that it's limited usage, but it works. And I'll tell you that the whole thing in retail, especially, is that a lot of these technologies take a lot of time to really become usable for customers. So even this kind of progress is significant
Right.
for the kind of problem they are trying to solve.
Correct. Yeah,
Because this problem, even with humans, they make mistakes. It's not such an easy thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings me to the first question in this section. So where do you think we are in India with respect to digital in retail? Of course, it's a huge range, wide gamut of things that we can talk about. But where do you think, in terms of maturity level, how far away are we from where Amazon is with its Go stores?
See, so I'll talk in two ways, right? I'll talk about e-commerce and I'll talk about physical retail, whichever way, whether it's an omni-channel company or purely retail company. See, one of the things which I have never understood, right, that when you talk of technology, the muscle which Amazon has, for example, right, that if they have, I don't know, whatever 10,000 or whatever thousand number of people in technology, as a customer or as a user, you can see the impact. Like we have been talking about books, right? Just the Amazon recommendations is one of my favorite ways to discover new books to read. They're so good. I don't know how they do it, but I've often seen that in remarketing itself, they will show me some books, and I think it's their own proprietary thing, which the way they do this remarketing. And you will just see the book, and you will drop everything, and you will want to go and read it at that point in time. And you might often buy it also. It's such a powerful recommendation, right? I have never ever seen anybody in India do that to me as a customer, where you can really feel the power of technology solving a real problem for you in that way. I don't think that, without taking any names, that there are lots of big companies with a lot of major tech bandwidth which they have, right? They have invested in big teams, they acquire companies, they have got all these people from the valley, the best in class people. But as a consumer, and I buy a lot, right? I use pretty much every e-commerce website. I don't see a lot of things which really wows me. And that for me is something which makes me feel as to, are we really at that level yet? I don't think you could give many of these people the benefit of the doubt that they don't have enough data, or they don't have enough people, or they don't have whatever. They have everything, right? the kind of monies people have raised and the kind of people they have put together. But Amazon is the only one where you really feel that they have solved some problems in such a beautiful way using technology. And I don't see that with anybody else. And I'm possibly biased because I use Amazon a lot and I use it for books and various other categories. And so the whole personalization thing is based on finding recommendations, right? They just do an incredible job and nobody comes remotely close. I'll tell you that I buy a lot of clothes on a lot of other portals. I buy shoes and it is nowhere close. And in the sense that I've given them enough information through my browsing and buying so that they should be able to personalize my experience. And while we hear about a lot of projects and a lot of work which people do, I don't see it as a user. I don't feel it. So that is one. Okay. In the physical retail also, I have seen some of these things, experience it firsthand rather, and I see some of the work which is happening in India. Okay. On the physical, I would say that the problems in India are very different, right? Because of the behavior of people and various other things. So it is not a simple comparison with the West or the Chinese or any such people. So it's not fair to compare to like. But at this, so I see some very interesting work in India as well. Okay. Which I have not seen in other countries also. I can tell you that there is some work which we have done in jewelry, which our customers also can feel. It's not that customers don't see that, like I was when I was on the other side, which I haven't seen people in America also do. And I see in some other categories also that people have done some work in digital to really solve Indian problems. You spoke about checkout or any such. So it's not obviously Amazon level. And I think that Amazon obviously is far ahead and something like the Go store is really advanced. But if you take all the other big physical retailers in the US in terms of how they have digitized and the technology which they are using, they are not really far ahead, right? The omni-channel experience or any such thing is not reached that level. There are some use cases which are very popular. Couponing and all is very popular in the US, right? For everything, they will say you show this and you get this. So that's a behavior which is very popular over there. But other than that, and I've gone to a lot of stores in America, and you don't get that sense that wow. So I would say that while we are still in that journey, so they are definitely ahead of us. That in the sense that every large retailer in America has now become digital and they have proper digital channels to sell, to market, to do all of that. They have pretty much omni-channel cases, forward or reverse logistics covered. There is definitely more technology. But other than Amazon, nobody really wows you. And India's problems are different, and we are also trying to solve those problems, right? Like payments in India is such a different problem, right? Or even logistics, last mile. In America, it's it's almost like software. It's plug and play. You can start selling in America today. You just get a FedEx or UPS or any of those people, and you can start shipping in 48 hours to any pin code in America. In India, it's a nightmare. So yeah, so I would say that yes, they are ahead, but it's not like a gulf in physical retail as much as it would be in e-commerce.
Right. And are there specific categories which are very unique to India and where we can actually make that jump much faster than retail in general?
I
Like
think we can do that in jewelry. I'm fully convinced of that.
Hmm.
That is the reason why we exist. So there is obviously that bias also. But I definitely feel that most people don't realize this. But in terms of manufacturing, we are already like best in class. Every brand in the world, every big brand, a lot of the jewelry is made in India, right? And in jewelry, even the manufacturing requires a lot of innovation, and there are new technologies like 3D printing and all which are being done. Right? I feel, and if you think about it, jewelry is one category which even Amazon has not cracked, right? Because it's such a hard category, right? Imaging and everything. And it does not fit the Amazon mold, right? They have the same unified experience for every category. Jewelry doesn't fit that mold. So it's going to always be hard for them. So jewelry is definitely one category where I feel we can do really well. Other than that, I think that we are doing a good job in electronics also, because digital has to be complemented with the service layer. So I think even the likes of Chroma or Flipkart, all of these guys, I think we do a good job in electronics also. I have not really experienced the recommendation engine, but I think you look for stuff based more on specification, right? In electronics, I think those things work decent. I think as a customer, I think I have a very good experience buying electronics online, and even in an omni-channel scenario. So I think that experience is fairly good. I think India's challenges are going to be like, for example, and one problem which we also see is that how to crack the small towns opportunity in India, right? Where you have the challenges of vernacular, understanding payments, even getting people to browse. It's not such an easy thing, right? With all the filters and everything. And I think that is one truly Indian problem. How do you get a 70-year-old to buy jewelry online or through one of the omni-channel cases who's living in Madurai who doesn't know English, for example? That's a massive opportunity because they buy a lot. They might not be buying through e-commerce, but they buy a lot, right? They buy jewelry and they buy each category. They have enough money, right? They have no commitment. So actually they are more, I would say, credit card happy, trigger happy in that sense. It's just that they don't have a credit card, so you have to solve that problem. But a truly Indian problem is that kind of thing, that how do you use a combination of possibly voice and vernacular and WhatsApp and some kind of assistance and easy payment means to crack that problem that they can seamlessly buy. That's a problem which I don't think is such an important problem for the West, but that is a good problem for India to solve.
Right.
Because if you are able to do that, technology creates a lot of other advantages for them, right? In terms of access to a lot of things which they might not have over there. Even possibly they don't even know about certain things because they have not had that exposure. Now exposure is easy, internet is easy. It's not a problem of affordability, definitely. But payment is the problem, or delivery is the problem. If you solve for that, and I think that's very important for all of these things which you speak about, right? E-commerce penetration and the share of e-commerce in total retail, all of those things.
Yeah. So what do you think should people, physical retailers, be thinking about when they think about their future relevance? With the omni-channel and digital coming, do you think that they're going to be just wiped out, or is there ways for them to think about how they can still be relevant in, say, 10 years' time in India?
See, this year is an extreme situation, right? Because of COVID. Sooner or later, we will get back to, I would not say going back to the old normal or the new normal. I don't know whichever normal, but there will be some kind of normal, right? Where, and I'll tell you that physical retail still has a much larger share of business as compared to whether you call it omni or you call it e-commerce or whatever, right? So it's not, that's completely gone away. We have also seen in our business that once the stores opened and things are back to normal, a lot of people who went from offline buying to online buying went back to offline buying again. So the preference to buy in a store is still higher than just buying online. Okay. So I think that I don't think there's going to be a wiping out as such in a offline versus online scenario. The online retailers will not wipe out or dominate the market as compared to the offline guys. I think the people who will win, who will be the ones who are able to combine the benefits of both in good ways. So for example, you take a retailer which might have got a great retail presence, right? But a good retailer is not just about retail, right? They would have solved merchandise problems, they have good customer understanding, they have good sales and service levels also, right? It's not that they don't have that. So they have customer loyalty, they have customer data, right? On top of that, even if you make them half digital, then it's such a powerful thing as compared to the other guy whose only advantage was that he was digital, right? So they have some advantages. And now what has happened in COVID is that because of the extreme change in behavior, and because they were ready for the situation because they were digital, they had an advantage. But you look at most digitally native companies and you compare them on things like merchandise, supply chain, customer experience, customer understanding, data, loyalty, other service levels, they don't compare on those things with the traditional guys, right? So if you think about it, what is easier or what is harder? For a guy who's got a lot of his business sorted, who has more money in the bank, who generates cash without dependence on a VC, to learn to become digital, or for a company whose survival is dependent on VC money, who's not made a penny in profits, whose only strength is digital, they have not developed the other strengths. For them to develop the other strengths, so I think that, so in that sense, it's actually, if you think about it, they will lose their advantage faster than they can think, right? Because the physical retailers can get all of this technology. They will take some time to adopt and learn it, but they will do it sooner or later. And the good thing which has happened, a lot of times physical retailers find it hard because there's too much internal resistance for change. So actually COVID was great for them because it forced everybody to change. There was no choice, right? I'm sure most CEOs and leaders in physical retail shops found it easier to get their agendas during COVID because nobody was going to resist it. So they actually had a great time. Now they have some digital adoption and they have a path, right? They have set the runway and they will become digital sooner or later. Then the digital only companies who do not have the other strengths are really going to have a hard time. So therefore, the guys who would really do well are people who will have to develop strengths, not just on the digital parts of the business, but the core fundamental parts of the business, right? Which is great merchandise, great experience, service level, pricing, all of that. So, there are all types of companies, even in the digital journey, right? There are people who have got some maturity and they have made some progress in that. And there are a lot of new ones, right? Who just think that just because they're digital, they have an advantage, which is not true. But at the same time, there are lots of great companies also, now you can see a lot of great DTC brands in India also, which are really building businesses the right way, right? They have a brand, they have great products, pricing, and they are on the path to becoming profitable and making money. So those would do well and those would not fall by the wayside. And they are also in a better situation in terms of the profitability also. And the retailers who will quickly adopt to digital will be in a great situation.
Yeah. So you mentioned, COVID gave an opportunity for people to drive their agenda and also to learn and make some of these switches. Uh, Related question to this, how do you think entrepreneurs should be building their organizations such that they are actually building enduring organizations which don't need an artificial boost like a COVID year to make these kind of changes, such that they are making this kind of progress on their own all the time? What do you think entrepreneurs should be doing to build enduring organizations and not really depend on, say, VC money, and basically get the fundamentals right, as you say?
Yeah, like you said, right? To get the fundamentals, you have to just do the fundamental things well, right? You need to first have a business plan where there is some math logically which works out, right? That at this whole unit economics thing, right? We see that a lot of these costs actually keep increasing as a percentage of revenue as scale happens. So there is no unit economics in that, right? We often criticize the finance and the accounts people that they're always worried about the math, right, and profitability, but actually they are right. So I think organizations which have very sharp focus, and even the entrepreneurs, on the financial health. So even if they could be losing money initially, but in their business model, there should be a way that with scale, or once certain problems get solved or a certain adoption happens, that there is a path to real profitability. That I think is the most important thing, that if you don't have that, then you will never become profitable, and there is no path for you to become an organization or an enduring organization. That's the single most important thing. And to do that, then you need to have all the other fundamental pieces in place, right? What is the problem which you are solving, and solving better than everybody else? Like I said, right? Now imagine that for the longest time, Carat Lane was a digital company, right? That was our advantage, possibly. Now everybody is going to be digital. Then we can't say we are digital. We have to do 2 or 3 things better than everybody else, so that's a reason for us to charge a premium, or to have a customer base, or to be competitive. And if you don't have that, then you have a problem, right? Your advantage is not being digital. You should have 2 or 3 very clear advantages which others don't have, right? And then those are, I think, the most fundamental things. And you obviously need to have people who are aligned to that vision, right? That these are the problems we are trying to solve, or this is the goal in terms of the financial and the business model which you have. They should get that and they should be happy doing that and they should work towards that. So I'll give you an example of that. That in our company, we do not have this massive tech bandwidth, which possibly some other organizations have, right? So we always have a challenge on that. Also, we know what problems we want to solve. And we are very clear that this is the problem which we want to solve. And if that can be solved in a non-tech way, then great. So there is nothing for people to say that we are not doing enough feature building, for example, not enough tech work. And I can tell you that a lot of people have left, not a lot, but definitely some people left. But after that, we didn't hire such people, so we didn't have that problem because they just found it very odd. I'm a product manager and I'm not building any cool stuff. And you always tell me that find a solution for this problem in a non-tech way, go and sell, go talk to customers. What is this product management? I thought I was going to build some cool products. So you are very clear that this is what I want. If you don't fit this vision, which is the path which we have created, that these are problems we want to solve in this way. If it involves tech or if then great. If you can do it, great. But if it has to be solved and we can't solve it through tech, then we need to find another way. So that is the plan for us to become profitable and to solve the problem we want to solve. And therefore you build a culture and a team which is aligned to that. So there are people who love doing that or there are people who hate that. And then obviously people who hate that don't hang around for too long. And we are trying to get better at telling them about that at the interview stage itself, that don't join us if you don't want to do this. And I think this also comes with time. So we also, when we started this organization, we didn't know about these things, right? Slowly we found that innovation stack, which I told you, which is the set of innovations which you want to do to solve a set of problems.
Right.
And then the culture and methodology which you want to build to, so that you are continuously working on solving those problems. Now we have much better clarity on that. And I think that's what all entrepreneurs need, that what is their innovation stack and what is the culture and people and method which will take them there. And then you just stay sharply focused on that.
I really like the way you laid out everything in such detail, and it's almost like this hierarchy, not hierarchy or a sequence that you're talking about, right? Where you first need to get the fundamentals right, and technology is just an enabler. It is not. It has to.
Technology is not like a Brahmastra, no? You fire that every time and you will win.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, let's come to the last section where we talk about future relevance, and we've talked a lot about future relevance of various things. So I'm going to give you certain words, terms, things, and I want you to comment on the future relevance of that. Okay. So first one, what is the future relevance of physical books? And I'm asking you about in general, not just specifically about your tastes.
I would say that there is hope for future for physical books, because I know a lot of people who love physical books, right? See, and what is the challenge against physical books, right? One is the cost is more, right? And people need to pay for it, because only then you can publish physical books, right? So I still see that there is enough demand for it and enough people buying those physical books. So that just gives me hope that there is business viability to publish physical books. Although I read Ramchandra Guha's interview yesterday, he was saying that they actually don't do well, and he, or even somebody like him who's such a successful writer, doesn't make enough money writing and selling books. So that was like a red flag, right? Or a danger sign. So yeah, there is, I think, a positive thing that enough people buy, but yeah, I think that, okay, so the other challenge is going to be about storage, right? And I think as people, we have smaller homes, right? As with every passing generation. And I really worry about the next generation, right? We are the generation which has spanned the analog world and the physical and the digital world, right? So we had enough time to develop a love for physical books and to have bibliosmia, right? I don't know whether the new generation which has been weaned on digital will have that. And that, I think, might be the biggest risk to physical books. That generation would not see the point of it. Like, they don't see the point of various things, and not any criticism of that. That's the way they have grown up and that's what they have liked. Right. So we might be the last of the bibliosmic people.
All right. Okay. So next one, what is the future relevance of sports audiences in live action?
I think that's actually getting better. So if I'll give you an analogy from music, that there was a time where they used to have concerts to sell CDs and cassettes, right? And now they give you the music free so that you can go to concerts, right? And we know that those things are really taking off, and a lot of people value these experiences, right, of watching things live. And I think that's the same for sporting events. I have had a few experiences like that. Like I went for the World Cup in Russia, and I can't wait to go back again to any of these things. And I know a lot of people who feel that way, and I see a lot of people doing that as well. So I think, take a COVID aside, that thing I think is going to get just. I don't think there's any risk or any threat to physical spectators wanting to watch sports. The risk is that everybody wants to watch the best. I have never gone and watched an ISL game, honestly. Okay. I have just gone for one IPL game because I'm not a very big fan of the quality of the cricket, honestly. It's good, you can go once, you enjoy the atmosphere and all. So I think the difference would be that what kind of sports would survive or do well and what kinds would not. So I think I'm an exception, but a lot of people enjoy the IPL and that will continue to thrive. But there's also a chance of an overkill over there, right? I worry a lot about test cricket, which I enjoy. I don't know how many people will continue to watch that, right? It might become like the physical book of the future. So sports will have a good time and there will be enough people who will want to watch. I think the risk is for events which might not be as popular, like test cricket or the ISL, for example. It's not really taken off to that level, right? We don't have crowded, full jam-packed stadiums. Those are at a risk because the financial cost of running those leagues and to run those teams, I don't think they are making money. So at some stage, they will reach a stage where they will question the viability and the losses they are making. They have a risk, like the lower leagues in England. Today, they have reached a stage where they are really at the risk of becoming extinct, and only the Premier League will survive. And that's actually a good way to look at it. That the likes of the Premier League will survive, but the lower leagues for the smaller towns and the lesser players, those are at a risk, right? Because they're only supported by those their fans in those smaller cities. They don't have a global audience, right? So they don't have a way to generate all this advertising and television money. So they are at a big risk.
Okay. Next one, what is the future relevance of personal information management?
Oh, it's such a complicated topic, and I also have gone back and forth on that. Initially, I was of the view that you just have to live with it, right? You'll have to share information, and if you worry about every piece of information which you're sharing and that somebody is using it, then you'll go mad. So it's okay, just live with it. But I recently, like a month back, I read Mindfuck, right, which is about Cambridge Analytica, and it just blew my mind away. Because, and credit to them, actually, there's actually a lot of good stuff to learn in that book. That if they have your information, right, just having information is not enough. Using that information and combining it with the right kind of psychological profiling and the right kind of communication and campaigns to really manipulate you. Dangerous, or the dangerous concoction when all of those things come together. So like they got the Facebook data, but the part which most people don't know is that they really did a lot of good work on the way you do experiments to improve your CTR, right? And the right kind of communication and the right, they did very rigorous studies on getting the right kind of consumer insight, right? The psychological profiling and all of that. If people are able to do that, and if that information is available, the thing with biases is that we don't even realize that we are being taken for a ride. And that is so dangerous, because you think of the power it gives somebody, right? It gave somebody the power to become the president of the United States, right? Which is the most powerful position in the world. So if your personal information, the having access to that information can give somebody that kind of power. And if you've read that book, there are cases where they have toppled governments in the Caribbean, in Africa, it's a different level of power which a small group of people can have, right? And I think that's the worrying part. Not just as an individual, but that a small set of people can have such power. It's like neo-colonialism in some sense, right? It's not just a set of small European countries, but again, a small group of people who can dominate the whole world, and we will not even realize, and we will be colonialized again. They would not have, control our lands physically, but they would control our minds.
All right. And finally, the last question: what is the future relevance of B schools in India?
I think they have a big problem. It's just that we still think that it's only a matter of time, no, before companies, it's actually in the hand of companies, right? The day companies figure out that I'm paying an unnecessary premium, they are going to be in big trouble. Because the whole supply, rather the whole demand, is created based on the opportunities which you get, right? Like I went to a B school because I thought that it's a guaranteed placement, right? And then a great life in an MNC company and all of that, right? That's why my parents paid for my fees. I didn't even have to take a loan. And even if the fees was 5 times and they had to take a loan or do sell something, they would have done that because it was the easiest way to a better life. If that starts to change, then B schools are in big trouble. So one is and actually companies, you can't blame them because at scale, hiring is difficult, right? It's an expensive mistake to make. So at scale, using the proxy of a degree is useful. But it's only a matter of time before some smart guy figures out a way to solve the company's problem. That boss, ye degree aap chodo. This is an alternate way to hire. You can hire if you follow sports, if you follow the NBA or even in football, what do the smart teams do today? They do not hire in the same way, right? Because in football, that problem has been solved. Or in basketball, that problem has been solved. That now there is analytics available which can show you that, okay, this is what you need. So you don't need to pay $20 million for this guy. You can buy these two players for $2 million each and you can get the same output, right? And that analytics is so sophisticated that teams know it works and it's working for them and people are winning titles. So it's only a matter of time before somebody has to create that same kind of analytical solution for companies to hire. And there are lots of people who are working on it, right? The coding companies, and it has to become more mainstream for a lot of the other hiring. But the day that happens and that gets proven, right? Actually, Zoho is an example, but I don't think anybody can copy Zoho's model. But if there's because Zoho built it themselves, right? If there's a ready-made product available, a proven thing, and it starts to work for people, then nobody is going to pay that kind of money. And why do you need a high salary? Like, why does a guy who comes out of B school want a 20 lakh salary immediately? Because that poor guy has a 30 lakh loan, right? And 40% of his salary is going off to pay his EMI. Imagine if he doesn't have an EMI, he might be happy with a 15 lakh job. So I think B schools are going to be in big trouble and I don't know whether they realize this or not. And I see it might take a long time. It's not easy to build that solution. There's a lot of credibility which they have built, right? As places to get great placement. Imagine if you took placements out to find a job yourself. Who will go to a B school? So the education is definitely not adding a lot of value, right? So yeah, either they solve their problems first or somebody else creates an alternate like they've created. And the reason it got created in sports, because the cost benefit analysis is so massive, right? The ROI of building a solution like that was so massive, right? Which is why all these companies like Okta and the guys in the NBA, they created this really great models, right? It's like the stock market, right? If you're a smart guy, the best ROI for your intelligence and your skill is in the stock market, right? So sports analytics is like that, right? Because the stakes are so high. One day they will figure out, okay, product management hiring or MBA hiring or marketing hiring also, let's solve that. And the day it gets solved, then they are in real trouble.
Yeah, I think we should wait for that day. It definitely sounds very exciting to see a Moneyball kind of a situation in the corporate job placement. So looking forward to that actually. So
I hope to see that day one day, really.
Yeah. On that note, Avnish, thanks a lot. Had a great time chatting up with you on a bunch of things, a lot of things which are mutual favorites for us: sports, reading, figured a lot in our conversation. So thanks a lot for coming over.
No, it's totally my pleasure, and I enjoy talking as much as I enjoy reading. So it's been a fun conversation to have with you.
Thanks.
Yeah, bye. Take care.
Stop.